When people ask me why I never smile in old photos, I say, because someone was always watching, and it wasn't for love. They think I'm joking, but I'm not. My name is Dorothy, and I'm 81 years old. But when I close my eyes, I'm back in that house again. Back in that hallway. Back in that room. And back under the lens of my brother's camera. We were just kids, or so I thought. I was only 11. He was 15, older, smarter, stronger. Everyone called him the golden boy. He had a camcorder. It was our father's, but my brother said he borrowed it. He filmed everything, the dog, the trees, the rain, and then he started filming me. Just for fun, he said. At first it was harmless, me brushing my hair, me drawing at the table. But then he asked me to do things I didn't understand. Turn around slower, show me your knees. Take off that sweater, it's too shiny on camera. I didn't understand. I thought he was being artistic. Until one night, I saw what he was recording. The tape I had woken up to get water. He left the door to the den open. The TV was on. And there I was on screen. Frozen, frightened, confused. Not acting, being watched. Why are you recording me? I asked him. He laughed. Because you're pretty. You should be grateful. That was the first time I felt dirty in my own skin. The beginning of something worse. After that night, everything changed. He started cornering me in rooms. When no one was home. When our parents were out late. When the house was too quiet. He brought the camera with him, always. It became part of the abuse. I learned to stop crying, because if I cried, he said it ruined the footage. So I sat still, silent, dead behind the eyes. That's what he wanted. And slowly, I disappeared inside myself. He kept the tapes in a shoebox, labeled them, sorted them. I once saw one labeled Dorothy, good lighting. I was 12. He was 16. People say childhood should be a collection of memories. Mine is a collection of frames I never asked to be in. Because when the camera was on, I wasn't his sister. I was his subject. And no one, not my parents, not my teachers, not my friends, ever asked what was behind my eyes. People ask me, didn't anyone hear you? And I always want to laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's tragic how quiet abuse can be. Our house had many doors and too many silences. The bathroom door, the basement door, the door to the guest room where he liked to set up the lighting. Each one could close tight. Each one could make a child disappear. My brother didn't need chains. He had charm. He smiled at our parents. He got straight A's. And when he told me to follow him quietly, I did. Because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. And terrified of what he might do if I screamed. The camera never left his hand. He treated it like a third eye. Even when he wasn't filming me, he held it just to remind me it could turn on at any moment. One time he whispered, "No one will believe you, but they'll believe the tape." That terrified me more than anything, because it meant he wasn't just hurting me. He was collecting me. The room with the green blanket. That's where it happened most. Downstairs, far from the kitchen, far from the windows, far from help. He'd lay the green blanket down like a set piece, arrange the light, turn on the camera, and then he'd become someone else entirely. I tried to say no once, just once. He slapped me, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to warn. You ruin this, and you'll regret it. I didn't test him again, because I believed him. And worse, I believed nobody else would protect me. I stopped looking in mirrors, because every time I didn't see a little girl. I saw a prop, a pose, a body that wasn't mine anymore. The mirror didn't reflect me. It reflected him, his gaze, his framing, his control. The rituals after every session, I did the same things. I washed my hands over and over until they burned. I scrubbed my skin raw. I whispered, "You're not disgusting," again and again. But the truth is, I didn't believe myself. I was beginning to think maybe I was made for this. Because he said it so many times. You're lucky it's me. Other guys wouldn't be so gentle. I didn't bleed. I didn't cry loudly. There were no bruises where they could see. But I screamed every night into my pillow, into my hands, into the silence that swallowed me whole. And somehow nobody heard a thing. There's a kind of pain worse than what someone does to you. It's what they refuse to see. I thought Mom would notice I changed. I stopped laughing, stopped eating, stopped playing with the dolls she used to sew for me. I flinched when she touched me. I slept with the lights on. But she never asked why. She just said, "Dorothy, don't be dramatic. Your brother adores you." The day she walked in, I'll never forget it. He had set up the camera again, told me to sit in my school uniform. He said it looked cleaner. I had just unbuttoned the top of my blouse because he told me to when the door creaked open. And there she was, my mother, holding a basket of laundry, frozen in the doorway. Our eyes met. I thought finally it was over, that she'd scream, pull him off me, grab me in her arms, and say, "How long has this been happening?" But instead, she blinked, stepped back, and closed the door. She never spoke of it. That night she made meatloaf. She asked me if I had done my homework. She kissed my forehead goodnight, and never once mentioned what she saw. Something broke in me, not just fear, not just sadness, but trust, hope, the belief that anyone would save me. Because if your own mother sees you being stripped of your dignity and pretends it didn't happen, then who will fight for you? He knew my brother looked at me differently after that. "See," he whispered, "even she won't stop me." And that's when I realized I was alone. Truly, completely, terrifyingly alone. But something else woke up in me. Not courage, not yet, but a question. If no one will fight for me, can I fight for myself? It wasn't a full thought, just a flicker. But flickers become flames, and flames can burn whole houses down. After that day, I stopped staring at doors, waiting for someone to walk through and save me. I started looking at windows instead, at the sky, at birds, at anything that proved the world was still out there. Because if I couldn't be saved, maybe I could still escape. They say you can't fight back when you're just a scared little girl. But what they don't tell you is even little girls learn how to sabotage. His collection kept growing. He had over a dozen tapes now. He hid them in a shoebox under the floorboard in our shared closet. I knew where it was. He didn't even try to hide it from me anymore. That's how sure he was that I'd never say a word, that I was broken enough to be obedient. But one day I took one. It was a Tuesday. He left the house to buy new batteries for the camcorder. I waited 10 minutes, checked that Mom was outside with the neighbor, then tiptoed upstairs, lifted the floorboard. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the box. But I reached in and pulled out a single tape, labeled in his handwriting, "Dorothy, clean lighting, May." My stomach turned. I slid it into my pocket. Not to watch it, God no, but to make it disappear. I didn't know where to put it. I couldn't burn it. He would smell the smoke. I couldn't throw it in the trash. He would find it missing within hours. So I did the one thing I could. I buried it, behind the shed. Beneath the tree my mother used to tie the clothesline to. I dug with my bare hands, covered the tape in dirt and rocks, and whispered, "That's one less piece of me you'll ever get back." That night he knew he didn't say anything directly, but during dinner he looked at me differently. Longer, colder, and later, when I walked past his room, I heard him opening the floorboard. Silence, then a sharp bang, then his voice low and dark. "You think you're clever?" I didn't answer. I locked myself in the bathroom and pressed my back to the door. The slap came the next morning, not playful, not a warning. A full strike, across the face, open-handed. He didn't yell, he didn't curse. He just looked at me and said, "Try that again and I'll make you regret it. No one's coming for you, not Mom, not Dad, not anyone." And for a second, I believed him. But deep inside, another voice was growing louder. "You've already lost one tape. Keep pushing." It became my new mission. I would take one tape every month. Every time he got careless. Every time he let the power go to his head. I wouldn't just survive. I would erase his archive, piece by piece. Because if he wanted to collect me on film, I would uncollect myself. That buried tape became a symbol of defiance, of a girl who was learning how to fight with nothing but silence and strategy. I wasn't ready to run, not yet. But I was learning how to leave. And sometimes that's where survival begins. After the first tape was gone, something shifted in me. I realized I didn't just want to survive. I wanted someone, anyone, to know I existed. I wrote my name where no one could see. At first, I carved it in places he never checked. Under the bed frame in the guest room, on the back of a closet drawer, inside a kitchen cabinet behind the canned beans. Just my name, Dorothy, I am here. It sounds small, but when you've been erased, even carving your name feels like a rebellion. Then I tried the mirror. When the house was empty, I took a bar of soap and wrote on the bathroom mirror, "I am not okay." I wiped it off before anyone got home. But for those 20 seconds, the truth was visible, even if only to me. I wrote a note for the mailman. I don't know where I found the courage. Maybe it was the last slap. Maybe it was the third tape I buried. But one day, I tore a page from the back of my spelling book. I wrote in my smallest handwriting, "My name is Dorothy R. I am being hurt in my house. Please help." I folded it, wrote to the mailman on the front, and slid it inside the daily letters my mom put in the mailbox. Then I waited. 3 days passed. Nothing. No sirens, no knocking, no eyes meeting mine differently. Just silence. On the 4th day, he came inside with the letter in his hand. My brother. He held it up like a trophy. "You really thought that would work?" He said the mailman gave it to Mom thinking I was playing a game. "You're a drama queen," she had said. Always were. He didn't even hit me this time. That scared me more. He just smiled and whispered, "Next time you try to talk, I'll make sure you never speak again." So I stopped writing for them, but I didn't stop writing. I wrote to myself. Little notes I folded into the lining of my pillow. Slips of paper I tucked inside library books before Mom returned them. "You're still here. This is not your fault. He doesn't own your story." One message made it to someone I didn't know which one. Maybe the note inside the social studies book. Maybe the scratch on the back of the school library desk that read, "My brother hurts me. Don't tell, just notice." But one day a teacher pulled me aside. She asked Dorothy, "Is everything okay at home?" I froze. The air around me stopped. The hallway felt 1,000 miles wide. And I said what I'd been trained to say. Yes, everything's fine. But for the first time, someone had seen me. And once you've been seen, you can't go back to being invisible. I didn't run yet. I didn't scream. But I started planting flags, not for rescue, but for proof. Because if I disappeared, I wanted the world to find something. Something that said, I was here, and I tried. There's a strange kind of power in something as small as a doorknob, especially when you're the one turning it from the inside. It was a Sunday. Mom and Dad had gone to church. My brother stayed behind faking a stomachache. I knew what that meant. We both did. He waited for the sound of their car leaving, then came to my door camera in hand, but this time I had locked it. Silence between us. He didn't knock, didn't speak. He just stood there. I could feel it, his presence on the other side, like a dark cloud pressing against wood. Then I heard it, the click of the doorknob trying to turn. Once, twice, then his breath. And finally, his whisper, "Open it, Dorothy." I didn't. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might pass out. But I stood frozen, one hand on the knob holding it tight from the inside. He rattled the door again, then slammed his palm against it. Once. Hard. "You think this changes anything?" I didn't answer. Because it did. It changed everything. In that moment, I realized he didn't have magic. He didn't control time. He didn't live in my blood. He was just a boy. A cruel, broken boy with a camera. And I didn't have to let him in anymore. What happened next? He backed away, slowly. Didn't say another word. I heard his door slam minutes later, and I collapsed onto the floor arms, shaking, tears finally coming not from pain, but from relief. I looked at myself in the mirror that night, still bruised, still scared, but no longer silent. For the first time, I whispered out loud, "He needs me to stay small, but I'm growing." I wrote that on a note and taped it behind the mirror the day I locked the door first. It wasn't escape, but it was a beginning. From the outside, it was just a locked door. But inside that room, a little girl stopped being a victim and started becoming a fighter. And though my brother still had his tapes, his threats, his power, he didn't have my consent anymore. And that would be the beginning of the end. People think rescue comes with sirens, with shouting, with drama. But sometimes it starts with a question. Are you safe? It was the school librarian, Mrs. Hart. Gray bun, thick glasses, always smelled like peppermint and dust. She noticed things. The way I flinched when someone touched my shoulder. The way I always borrowed books about Escape Prisoner of Zenda. The Count of Monte Cristo, even Anne Frank. One day she slipped me a note, not in class, not in front of anyone. But inside the back cover of a book, I borrowed Jane Eyre. It read, "If you need someone to talk to, my door is always open. You are seen." I stared at that note for hours. Slept with the book under my pillow. I didn't go to her, not yet. But I started to believe maybe I could. Then came the juice box moment. One afternoon I stayed behind in the library, pretending to look for a new book. She sat beside me, offered a juice box, and said softly, "You don't have to tell me anything, but just nod if home doesn't feel safe." I didn't move. My body froze like it always did, but my eyes, they filled with tears, and I nodded. Once, tiny, almost imperceptible, but enough. She didn't panic, she didn't gasp, she didn't call someone immediately. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you for trusting me. We'll go slow, but we'll go." What happened next? She didn't report it to the principal, not yet. She followed protocol carefully without tipping off my family. Instead, she called a counselor, someone trained, someone patient. They met with me at school, in a side room, no cameras, no tape recorders, just kindness, and a lot of tissues. That was the first time I said the words out loud. My brother hurts me. It felt like vomiting out poison, but with every word, the weight lifted just a little. Not because I was saved yet, but because I had finally said it. And someone believed me. When the counselor called for a meeting, they said it would be safe. They said it would help, but they didn't know my family. It was in a gray room with gray chairs. Mom sat stiff in her seat. Dad looked confused. My brother looked bored. The counselor began gently. "Dorothy has shared something very serious." My mother interrupted. "She lies. She always lies." My heart sank. I tried to speak. I said his name. I said the word abuse. I said he filmed me. But all I heard back was, "You misunderstood. It's just sibling teasing. She wants attention. She's dramatic. You're trying to destroy this family." Then my brother cried not real tears, manipulated sobs. He buried his face in his hands and said, "I don't know why she hates me." And they believed him. Of course they did. He was the golden child, the boy genius, the churchgoer, the honor roll student. Then my father stood up. He didn't shout, he didn't curse. He just looked at me and said, "You're no daughter of mine." That cut deeper than all the bruises. That was the moment I realized they chose him. Not truth, not justice, him. The counselor ended the meeting early. She said we needed space. She said it was a lot to process. But what she meant was, they don't believe you, not yet. I walked out of that room alone. No one followed me. No one held my hand. No one asked if I was okay. And for a moment, I wondered if maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I had stayed quiet, none of this would have happened. But then I remembered the tapes buried, hidden, proof. And I made a promise to myself right there. They may not believe my words, but one day they'll see what he filmed. And when they do, the silence will burn. That meeting didn't save me, it broke me further. But sometimes things must shatter before they can be rebuilt. And though my family turned away from me that day, I turned toward something stronger, my truth. And I wasn't going to bury it anymore. He used the camera to control me, to trap me, to document my pain. But now, I would use it to take back everything. It started with an idea. If they wouldn't believe me, if words didn't matter, then maybe images would. What if I caught him the way he caught me? What if his weapon became my evidence? I waited weeks. I studied him. When he was careless, when he left the door open, where he left the tripod, where the charger sat. I memorized everything. I buried fear under focus. I planned like my life depended on it because it did. The setup, it was a Saturday. He thought I had given up. I played the part quiet, submissive, defeated. He told me to come to his room. I nodded, eyes down. But what he didn't know was this. I had already hidden a second camcorder behind a stack of boxes in the corner. It was already recording. He did what he always did. But this time I was watching him too. From behind the lens, from behind the pain. And when it was over, when he left to take a shower, I grabbed the tape. I didn't bury this one. I hid it in my backpack. Inside a hollowed-out textbook. Then walked straight to Mrs. Hart the next morning. "I have proof," I whispered. She didn't ask what it was. She simply said, "Let's go somewhere private." The counselor watched it with gloves on. She couldn't get through 5 minutes. Her hands shook. Her mouth trembled. She turned it off and said, "This is enough, more than enough." For the first time, no one asked me, "Are you sure?" For the first time, they believed what they saw. The authorities stepped in fast. Serious, no more tiptoeing. They came to the house with warrants. They searched the floorboards. They found every tape, every single one. And my brother, the golden boy, was handcuffed on our porch while the neighbors watched in silence. He once made me feel powerless, like I was just footage a subject in his sick production. But I turned that camera into my shield, my voice, and finally my freedom. Justice is not a warm room. Its cold tile fluorescent lights whispers from people who think they know you. The trial began 6 weeks later. They had the tapes. They had the counselor's reports. They had my testimony. It should have been simple, but nothing ever is. My family showed up for him. Mom clutched a Bible. Dad wore his best suit. They sat behind my brother and never looked at me. The defense said I made it all up, that I staged the camera, that I was troubled, that I had a history of attention-seeking behavior. They played his grades, his awards, his football clips. They painted him as a boy who made a mistake, and me as a girl who ruined everything. But I stayed quiet because the tapes spoke for me, because the bruises had already screamed, because the courtroom didn't need my tears. It needed my courage. The verdict came fast guilty on multiple counts. But even as they led him away in handcuffs, my mother turned to me and hissed, "I hope you're proud. You destroyed this family." That was the day I understood something painful. Some people will choose the lie, even when truth is undeniable. I walked out of court alone. No balloons, no hugs, no peace. Just cold air and a long road ahead. But I wasn't empty. I was full of something new. Power. The kind that doesn't come from winning, but from surviving. The courtroom didn't wrap things in a bow. It didn't heal me. It didn't erase the nights I cried into silence. But it named what happened. It told the world. She wasn't lying. And sometimes that's where healing begins. When the trial ended, I expected hugs, phone calls, something. But my family vanished. They didn't just disown me, they acted like I never existed. I packed my things in silence, a suitcase, a backpack, a small box of books. The house I once called home was no longer mine. I walked out the door with no keys, no mother's voice behind me, no father's hand on my shoulder, just the sound of gravel under my shoes. I slept on Mrs. Hart's couch for 3 weeks. She gave me hot meals, warm blankets, and a room with a window. "You're not broken," she said. "You're just beginning." I went back to school, kids whispered. Some stared, some looked away. But I showed up, every day, because I refused to disappear. I wrote in my journal, I have no family, but I have a name, I have a voice, and I have one tiny borrowed room, where no one locks the door. Then came the letter 1 month after the trial, from a girl I barely knew, 3 years older than me. It said, "I watched your story on the news. What you said saved me. I told someone, I'm safe now." That was the moment it all changed, not because the pain was gone, but because I realized my voice didn't just fight for me, it fought for someone else, and that meant I was no longer alone. I lost my home, but I found a voice. I lost my family, but I found courage. And in a small borrowed room with a window that faced east, I learned to wake up not as a victim, but as Dorothy. The pain never fully left. But over time, it stopped controlling me. It became something else. Fuel. I studied law not for prestige, not for power, but because I knew there were still girls out there, still locked doors, still stories silenced by shame. And if I couldn't save myself back then, I could save them now. I started small volunteering at shelters, reading bedtime stories to kids who didn't trust anyone, holding hands during court hearings, teaching them the words I never had. It's not your fault. You didn't deserve it. You are not alone. You matter. Then I opened my first case, a 7-year-old girl. Same bruises, same silence. The moment she saw me, she flinched. But I knelt beside her and whispered, "You don't have to be afraid of me. I used to be you." And her eyes widened, not with fear, but with hope. That's when I knew I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was healing. Because healing isn't just about forgetting. It's about becoming someone who can walk back into the fire, not to burn, but to carry someone else out. I started speaking schools, churches, online forums. Sometimes the rooms were empty, sometimes packed. But I told my story again and again, not for sympathy, but for awakening. Because every time someone hears it, another silence breaks. And somewhere, a door unlocks. My brother took my childhood. My family took my shelter. But I took everything they tried to destroy and turned it into a lantern. One I now carry for others still stumbling in the dark. I was 63 when the letter came. A plain envelope, no return address. Just my name in handwriting I hadn't seen in decades. Inside was a single page trembling ink, sparse words. "Dorothy, I know I don't deserve this. I saw your interview last year. I cried. I remembered everything. I'm sorry. I'm sick. I have months left. Please, I need to talk to you. Your brother, my hands went cold. For years I had dreamed of this moment, of apology, of justice that wasn't ordered by a judge but born from guilt. And yet, I didn't feel peace. I felt fire. I didn't respond right away. I walked for hours that day, sat in the park, listened to the trees, and I asked myself, what do I owe him? Not justice, he already got that. Not forgiveness, I had given that to myself long ago. So what then? The truth was, I didn't want to carry the past anymore. Not out of love, not out of hate, but because I was tired. Tired of the weight. Tired of letting a man who broke me still write even a single line of my present. I made a call to the hospice where he stayed. I spoke to a nurse. I said, tell him I read the letter. Tell him I healed. But I have no more space for his words in my story. And that was it. I never heard back, but in the quiet, I felt no guilt, no regret. Just a quiet, strange freedom. Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a decision. And that day, I chose peace over reconciliation. Not because he didn't matter, but because I finally did. It was a rainy afternoon when my granddaughter asked me, Grandma, why don't you have any pictures from when you were little? I paused. She was only 8, bright eyes, messy ponytail, full of questions. I smiled and said, because the camera wasn't always kind to me. She tilted her head. Did it break? I hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, sweetheart, but not in the way you think. She crawled into my lap, and without knowing why, she whispered, were you sad? I held her hand. I didn't tell her everything, not yet. But I said, yes, a long time ago. But I'm not sad now, because I get to be your grandma, and that makes everything worth it. That night, I opened my old journal, the one I started when I first escaped. The one with pages stained by tears and ink. And for the first time in decades, I started writing again. Today, my granddaughter asked about my past. I didn't tell her everything, but one day I will. Because I want her to know, even when someone tries to silence you, your voice still matters. I began sewing a memory quilt, not with photos, but with pieces of fabric from shelters, college dorms, courtroom hearings, and volunteer centers. Each square told a story. Each stitch said, I survived, and I created beauty from pain. Then she asked again weeks later, Grandma, can I hear a story from when you were little, but a real one? One you remember. So I took a deep breath, and I began. Some stories are told in fairy tales, some in bedtime whispers, and some like mine are carved out of shadows and wrapped in love. Because even if there are no photos on the wall, I left something greater, a legacy of truth, a name that didn't vanish, a story that found its way to light. I used to think my story would end in silence. A forgotten girl, a damaged woman, a victim's name no one remembered. But here I am with silver hair smile lines and a garden that blooms every spring. Still breathing, still standing, still telling my truth. I forgave the past, not to let them off the hook, but to unhook them from my heart. I didn't need them to be sorry. I just needed to be free. I told my story again in church basements, on podcast interviews, at women's shelters. Each time it hurt a little less. Each time I saw someone's eyes widen with the same fear I once carried, and the same flicker of hope I now hold. I left letters behind, one for my granddaughter, one for every girl who feels forgotten, one for that scared little girl I once was. You made it. You're not what they did to you. You're what you chose after. My name is Dorothy. I was abused. I was betrayed. I was left alone. But I never gave up. I spoke, I healed, I helped, and now I rest in peace with the knowing that I lived, I loved, I lit the way. The screen fades to black. One final line appears. To every survivor, your story matters. And your silence is not your shame. It is your strength waiting to speak.